Hello, and thank you, everyone. I'm Mieke Eoyang. I run the National Security Program at Third Way. So I do some work around nuclear technologies, but it's less on the civilian nuclear side and more on the weapons side. And this panel is about the global community and how we get the global community to yes. We've heard a lot about the advantages of advanced nuclear technology and its possibilities, but there are serious concerns that potential customers, both in the US and around the world, have to consider when they're thinking about whether or not to adopt this technology. And we have to talk, and here we're going to talk about both the upsides and the obstacles that we have to approach in order for this technology to succeed, not just in the US, but as a global technology. I'd like to introduce my panel. We have three very distinguished people here. First, Priscilla Atansah, who comes to us from Ghana, where she is a research associate at the Center for Global Development and works for the Ministry of Finance and is an energy advisor there. Amy Roma, who is a partner at Hogan and Lovells, where she advises her clients on how to handle some of these major nuclear deals. And Laura Holgate. Ambassador Holgate is the former ambassador to the IAEA, was the senior director on the National Security Council handling WMD issues, and also had a long career at the Nuclear Threat Initiative. So I want to start off with Priscilla. When we talk about nuclear technologies, what's often in the news are countries where we have geopolitical concerns. So we don't talk as often about countries like Ghana and what they might be thinking about as they're considering how to meet their energy needs and advance nuclear technologies. What kinds of things is Ghana considering as it looks at these technologies?
Thank you, and thank you all for having me. I'm supposed to dash out, so hopefully this is a productive conversation. I think for most people, I want to say, or would be wondering, Ghana is a bit of a random choice for a conversation like this. But in fact, today is our 61st independence anniversary, so I'm missing that to be here. And in 1963, actually, when Ghana was in the process of commissioning its first mega hydro plant, a nuclear energy program was also inaugurated in the same year. And I think from 1961 through 1964-65, there was active collaboration with the then Soviet Union to develop a nuclear program, which actually led to the creation of the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission, which still functions today, more so as a research and advocacy body. In 2015, I mean, of course, since 1963, there was a coup, and so the nuclear program really was the last thing on anyone's mind at the time. But in 2015, just in the middle of a major power crisis that stunted economic growth by about 2% of GDP, Ghana reignited the conversations around nuclear energy and signed an MOU with Russia for two 1,000 megawatt VVER light water reactor plants. And I think that was a major signal in terms of the country's renewed commitment to looking at more seriously nuclear energy as the energy of the future. In Ghana, about 85% of Ghanaians have access to electricity. So the energy conversation is not so much about domestic energy security, it's more about positioning the country as a major energy exporter for the West Africa region. So it's a West Africa power pool. No country has started trading yet, but I think Ghana has this ambition, since we already have secured our domestic energy supply, we have this ambition to be the first to export power into the power pool, and this is where nuclear energy comes in. And so my main concern, I started at the Ministry of Finance early in August, more so from a research angle, where I had previously looked at the role of small modular reactors for a country like Ghana. The conversations, I think, are a bit stunted in terms of what the possibilities truly are. I went to a summit in December with a nuclear caucus and the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission, and the focus still is on these 50, 60-year-old light water reactors. We're looking to commission a first plant in 2029, and this year, 2018 through 2020, will be when government is expected to decide on the kind of reactor you want, where it's going to be sited, and who gets to build, own, and operate it. And I think now is a critical time to to shift the focus of the domestic caucus to be more aspirational, to be more forward-looking. In a country like Ghana, the focus right now is not really on climate change per se, but I think that advanced nuclear technologies present an incredible opportunity to shift the conversation from these outdated technologies and to look more towards how do you really leverage advanced nuclear to tackle concerns that we have locally on job creation, on growth, and on positioning the country that is fit for the future. And I'll be happy to, I guess, talk more. There's a lot to say. Yeah, thank you.
So, Amy, lawyers are trained to see the potential risks to a deal and to help their clients navigate those risks, and for investors and for companies and for things like that. So when you hear about an opportunity like one in Ghana, what are the things that you're looking out for? What are the things that you're warning your clients about that they have to think about when they're competing in the international market?
No, I wouldn't want to use the word warning. I want to more say flag for strategic consultation. I think, Priscilla, the fact that you're here from Ghana, I don't think is random at all. I think that's exactly the country we would want to have here having this discussion. Because when we're looking at advanced reactors and what their potential is, I don't think we're looking at exporting our technology to France and having them build it. Maybe they will be a customer, but I think we're looking at countries that have never had nuclear before, that are looking at getting into this program and see the huge potential. Perhaps not necessarily from a climate change perspective, though it is clean, which is good and makes it more marketable, but from the opportunity of providing affordable and reliable energy, particularly to remote communities, areas that don't necessarily need to support large grids. And so when a company comes to me, an advanced reactor company, and they say, we're looking at engaging in discussions with a country like Ghana. There's parallel paths that need to be pursued on the international side and on the domestic side for something like that to happen. On the international side, I'd say we need to do an initial assessment on whether they have a nuclear regulator. Have they engaged with the IAEA? Where are they on establishing a nuclear regulatory program? How sophisticated is that nuclear regulatory program? Did they have one, but it's really gotten dusty over the years and needs to be updated? Are they capable of providing regulatory oversight for not just nuclear, but advanced nuclear technologies? Do they have a nuclear liability law? Is there one in the works? Are they a member of the Nuclear Suppliers Group? There's a whole host. In fact, I actually have a questionnaire in the can that I provide. And we've done this analysis for dozens and dozens of countries. And I no longer am surprised when somebody comes to me with a new country and asks for that type of analysis. The other things that you need to consider is, do we have a bilateral agreement for nuclear cooperation in place with that country? Probably not. Have they engaged with the State Department about getting one in place? Where are they in those communications? What's the export control regime? Would DOE grant, are they generally authorized? Would DOE grant a specific authorization so that we could enable US origin nuclear technology to even get over into that country into the first place? On the US side, the things that advanced reactor companies need to be thinking about are, where are we on our schedule? Could we support the deployment schedule that this country is looking for? And how do we market it? So you need to be cost effective, and you need to have a schedule that is supportable and that would support what that end customer needs. And maybe just to kind of bridge that final gap. I mentioned that people are pursuing the two parallel paths. It's what is that country doing with their program, what is going on in the United States, how do you get our information over there? But that other path is, how do you work with each other? How do you engage? And how do you enable the advanced reactor company in the United States to get in a position where they could have an end customer in that new country? And who is your customer? Is it going to be a state corporation? Is it going to be the owner and the operator? Are you going to be importing an operator? And one of the most basic fundamental issues that I cannot stress enough is that we take for granted nuclear safety culture in the United States. people who are involved in the nuclear community assume that it is obvious how you would run a nuclear company, whether you're in the United States or whether you're in a foreign country. And that is not the case. The concept of safety culture and embedding that in the corporate governance of an owner and an operator, and ensuring a nuclear regulator understands that, needs to be something that is stressed decades before a program is actually deployed in order to make that something that can be done.
So, Ambassador Holgate, you've wrestled with these issues at the highest international levels and have seen how the international community approaches these things. As Senator Whitehouse just said, we have an outdated regulatory regime that is not prepared to deal with a lot of these technologies. What kinds of things do you think we need to be adjusting in the way that we approach this internationally and domestically to be able to be prepared for these technologies?
Well, I think we, first of all, need to really improve the levels of communication between the developer community, the national regulatory bodies, and the international community, particularly in the International Atomic Energy Agency. And one of the things that we have found in the project that I've been helping Third Way on is that conversation is happening. And even more so than people might have thought, but it's still at a very early level. And you know, what's one of the biggest challenges that nuclear energy faces is its inherent connection with nuclear weapons. That's not something that we can wish away, even though it is a rare occurrence. And so the ways that people think about this are the toolkits that they turn to if you're worried about a state actor that has a civilian nuclear energy program, that they might somehow divert that materials or the knowledge or the facilities to support a weapons program. And the solution to that is through international safeguards that are applied by the International Atomic Energy Agency to most countries outside the United States. And this is one thing that isn't as well understood sometimes, I think, by the US-based advanced reactor community, is that to the degree that they're exporting these reactors, they are going to be under IAEA safeguards. And that's a very novel way of thinking about it. The other set of risks that comes from when you think about, you know, how do you prevent the link between nuclear energy and nuclear weapons is on the non-state actor side. And there you're thinking about theft of materials, you're thinking about sabotage, and the solution to that set of issues has to do with nuclear security. This is a requirement that exists at the national level. But it's not always as clearly embedded in the national level regulatory bodies. And there are no global binding standards and inspections the same way there are on safeguards. So this is something that each country is left to their own devices to decide what they believe is meaningful. The International Atomic Energy Agency offers guidelines on how to do that, best practices, peer reviews, a whole set of support for member states, but none of that is required. And so these are some of the really important things that I think, and that the advanced reactor developer community, working together with the nuclear security community, the nuclear safeguards community, the non-proliferation community, to really design these capacities into these reactors. The reason that these are often seen, that the safeguards and security are seen as burdens, is because they've been slapped onto the outside of 60-year-old technology, as Priscilla mentioned. If we have a chance to design them in at the beginning to reward and support those that are doing that particularly well, then that much more lowers the barrier for the possibilities to use these reactors all over the world in a way that the massive deployment that's going to be necessary to really make a dent in the climate challenge.
So that brings up a really fascinating point, the way that the U.S. tries to build in these safeguards and verification regimes. Priscilla, when a country like Ghana is thinking about who they're going to purchase this technology from, how do you assess the advantages and disadvantages of looking at the U.S. versus potential other suppliers?
So going back to the Russian MOU, in December, when I went to this summit with the Nuclear Caucus, I was asking, well, what about small modular reactors? And their main concern is we don't want to be guinea pigs to a technology that is not tried and tested and true. And I think that when it comes to reactor choices, for a country like Ghana, they the policymakers and the people in charge want to know that, do we have an international bank of people who are experts and who will be able to advise and who will be able to train our regulators domestically? I think the advantage for the United States is that there already is a very strong bilateral partnership between Ghana and the US in the energy sector. So through the Obama administration, Power Africa, for example, we are in the process of finalizing a compact with the Millennium Challenges Corporation to concession out our electricity distributor for 25 years. So there is a working partnership with the United States. And I think that, again, going back to my earlier point, there needs to be more that the U.S. can do, not just from the government perspective, but from people like Third Way and from the Priscilla Foundation to try and inject a new sense of energy into the kind of conversations that policymakers are having. I don't think the Russian MOU is going to go anywhere, precisely because a set of institutional interest and that you need around something of this magnitude simply is not there. And I think the energy certainly will be different if it's an American company with the backing of the US government, US regulators saying, hey, we think this is a great new way forward for you. It's just a more rational fit into the kind of partnership that we have going on, not just on the energy security side, but even with, if you think about the threat of terrorism in the West African region. I think Ghana has a strong partnership with the US, so I think we have a few bases in Ghana. We're a strong democracy. So those linkages are already there. I think they just need to be amplified to meet this objective of safe and forward-looking nuclear energy.
So Amy, when a country like Ghana says they don't want to be the guinea pig for a new technology, how do we in the US make sure that we are setting up a regulatory regime that allows them to feel like they could adopt that technology? What do we need to do on our end?
So there's probably a twofold response to that. Ghana is not alone in not wanting to be the guinea pig for new technologies. I think countries that are, particularly countries that are new to nuclear, do not likely want to deploy a first-of-a-kind technology. And so the best thing that could happen for a U.S. company looking at deploying in Ghana is to have a U.S. customer first, or deploy a have a demonstration reactor to prove that the technology works and that you can build it, and that you can build it the way you think that you can build it, and it's going to work the way you think it's going to work. On the regulatory front, that's an interesting question. So we've heard the word chicken and egg problem a few times around here today. But one of the things that's interesting is that, what is going to help the advanced reactor community going into a country like Ghana that doesn't have a long, sophisticated nuclear regulator that's used to licensing these types of technologies and overseeing them, is having a U.S. design certification. That would be very helpful, or having a design certification from a regulator, but the U.S. design certification process is very thorough. And I think that gives a lot of assurances to other countries about what the status of the design is. But the U.S. design certification process costs money. And it's difficult to do when you don't have a customer yet. And so having a U.S. customer, and this is an area where I know we've heard some discussions, but having the U.S. government step up, have a power purchase agreement, actually being the first customer for companies that are looking at deploying these technologies, proves the technology. It gives you through that design certification process where you show it works, and then you can export it.
So Laura, coming back to that, right, if the U.S. is going to sort of walk the walk first, what kinds of things should the U.S. be including as they're thinking about these safeguards and these regulations that would be best practices to move forward?
Well, there's a lot of resources available to the developer community, first of all, within our own nuclear regulatory agency, and to the experts there who are very familiar with international safeguards and security standards, as well as the very high quality U.S. standards on these issues. Another resource is the IAEA themselves. The developer community can be talking to these to the IAEA. They don't have to be waiting until they sell a product to a country and then having that country go and represent that technology to the IAEA. So there's, for example, the IAEA is having their every 4 years Safeguard Symposium this fall. One of its focus areas is on new technology. So I would encourage anyone who wants to really influence how the IAEA approaches safeguards for some of these novel fuel cycles. This is your chance to both learn and share information about how those treaty requirements are going to be applied to your reactor technology. The other place to look at is the World Institute for Nuclear Security, otherwise known as WINS. It's a non-government organization that has free membership available to anyone who works in the nuclear security field, and they have collected corporate best practices. They do a wide range of trainings. They have something called the WINS Academy that is a distance learning certification program for nuclear security for people who operate on nuclear security issues at different parts of an organization. And so that I really want to highlight, Amy mentioned the safety culture. Security culture is another important component of what the U.S. needs to be ready to transfer to the operators and regulatory community that they'll be working with. And so I think I'll just, the final point I would make is, as Amy pointed out, the world looks to the NRC as really the model of high quality safety judgment, and to create more opportunity for the NRC to work internationally. I know from experience it's great folks, but they don't have the budget because of the way the NRC is funded to be as visible and present in the international community, either in venues like the International Atomic Energy Agency or in support of our bilateral work globally. And so really helping nurture and mature and mentor the regulator community in these new countries, I think, is a huge thing that the U.S. can offer.
That's interesting. So Priscilla, from your perspective, do you feel like the U.S. is doing enough to talk about the benefits of its technology to a country like Ghana, or is there more that's needed in terms of the U.S. outreach to potential customer countries?
Yes, more. I was remarking to someone earlier, I think one of the biggest surprises to me when I started to work at the ministry is there really isn't as much of an American presence, government-wise, as I thought there would be. I think the MCC Compact has been a good rallying point for U.S. engagement with the new government. But beyond that, I think that there certainly can be more engagement, not outside of energy, period. And I think that the in Ghana are beginning to feel that there's a sense of stillness in America's efforts and engagement in countries like Ghana. I know people talk about this in a cliched sense that, oh, they're the Chinese and the Russians. I mean, not so much the Russians, but the Chinese definitely is true. And even more so with the Europeans now, when we see with the migrant crisis, the EU has sort of reamped its engagement with Ghana. The Germans, for example, have this Compact of Africa program with Ghana and 6 other African countries, and Ghana is definitely kind of the lead point of contact. And for this Compact of Africa, the focus with Ghana is renewable energy. So last month, or maybe in December, the German ambassador, the Ghanaian finance minister, and I want to say that some ranking politician in Germany were all down in Ghana to sign a $100 million compact on renewables. So these are the kind of things that draw people's attention and energy and feel that, okay, this is a sense of motion, the momentum want to continue to engage. I think that a great opportunity now, the government has this One District, One Factory initiative, and we have a big opportunity and also challenge right there. You want to set up a factory in each of the 216 districts, both small, medium, and large. What energy are you going to use to power those? our hydro plant is almost 60 years old. It won't be functional in the next 10 years, and we will have an energy crisis on our hands. And I think this is where some more engagement from the U.S. to really think that how can we make this economy a partner for the U.S. and how do we invest in this country beyond the rhetoric of FDI and, aid and whatnot. So I think the U.S. can definitely be more transformative.
So we need to step up our game, but the other countries in the world are stepping up their game as well. Laura, as we talk about other civilian nuclear deals, and we're looking at Saudi Arabia potentially on the horizon, how do you assess where competitor countries are? What are they doing? What are the advantages and disadvantages of the U.S. in this competition?
Well, it's really been a challenge for U.S. Nuclear companies to compete against the state-funded enterprises of China and Russia, and even to a certain degree, France and South Korea. So that they're already in a tough spot that way, and certainly more resources, more creative resources for U.S. government support for the nuclear energy industry is going to be a critical component of success. But from a perspective on the security side, the commitments that go along with access to U.S. nuclear technology that are embodied in the 123 agreements for peaceful nuclear cooperation that Amy mentioned are really second to none. They come to us from the Atomic Energy Act. It gives the United States a voice in the future use of any material or technology that we provide. It gives the right to go back and retrieve it if the agreement is not fulfilled. It gives the U.S. the right to evaluate the security status of any material that we send overseas as part of a 123 agreement. And these are true for every single agreement. These are part of the bread and butter of the U.S. nonproliferation commitments that come along, that we ask of those countries that have, that we're providing access to U.S. nuclear technology. Those are, in many cases, not replicated in comparable agreements that are reached by some of our competitors. And I should mention the other critical point of that is that all material and facilities at the U.S. that contain U.S. technology has to be under IAEA safeguards. So those are some really strong guarantors that the U.S. any material or technology that the U.S. is providing does not end up, somehow contributing to, some kind of a weapons program or some kind of a military program. And that's really critical globally if we're going to see, again, the spread of nuclear energy at the scale and scope that's required. It's going to have to come along with the confidence that will be secure against any kind of misuse. And we have now the opportunity with advanced reactors to really break the link between weapons and energy. And that's what I'm hoping that conversations like this can lead to.
Okay.
So I was just going to say, one thing that the advanced reactor community now can do is benefit from the lessons learned from the large-scale reactor community and how they lost their footing on the international level. And what can we do now to adjust fire and become competitive again? And one of the things that we can do is, our advanced reactor community is not owned by the U.S. government, and it is not packaged as a complete deal with a nice little bow on it by the U.S. government abroad. But we can still work together. You can have advanced reactor designers teaming with, experienced nuclear constructors, fuel fabrication facilities, putting that deal together. And the U.S. government is really helpful right now. You go to them and you say, we're engaging in this discussion, with this country, I want to keep you appraised of what's going on. And they say, great, how can we help? And that is a paradigm shift in a bit as to how things necessarily have worked in the past. And if you go in and meet with the government, you could meet with the State Department, DOE, and Commerce. They'll all come to DOE for a meeting, and you can talk strategically, how does everything need to line up in order for me to realize my commercial needs, and what do you guys need to be doing on your end? And by proactively doing that now, it can make a significant change in the outcome.
That is a lot of homework for the U.S. government in terms of what we need to be doing. I want to be sensitive on time because we had a very short panel, and we could have actually talked about this for hours. There's so much to cover. So I will just say really quickly, I want to thank my panelists for being here today and for helping us navigate through how that we can get the global community to be more receptive to U.S. advanced nuclear technologies. And I feel like we've gotten a lot of really great ideas out here today, a lot of work that we'll have to talk about in greater length in future summits. But I want to thank my panelists for participating.